It's been said that luck is the intersection of preparation and opportunity. Welcome to the Australian Hunting Backcountry podcast, where we will focus on all things hunting in the backcountry, not just in Australia, but everywhere that backcountry hunting is possible. My name is Tobias, and if you're a hunter with no backpacking experience, or even an expert, I would like you to join me as we explore gear, places, and technologies, hear lived experiences, different perspectives, and share the passion that people have for a hard-earned backpack hunt. I appreciate you being here with me as I try to increase the knowledge that will bring us better luck in the backcountry. The Australian Hunting Backcountry podcast is proud to welcome two new partnerships for 2024. Skeleton Optics Australia and On Track Meals are now both sponsors of the show. Skeleton Optics Australia is a family-run Australian-based business offering premium high-performance and durable sunglasses for active outdoor users. Skeleton Optics sunglasses use polarized Zeiss lenses and feature frames designed with lightweight and impact-resistant materials that provide a secure and comfortable fit. I personally now use Skeleton Optics sunglasses and would encourage you to reach out to Chris and Daniela if you would like further information on what glasses might suit you best. On Track Meals are made in Brisbane and is a 100% Australian and veteran-owned business. On Track Meals pride themselves on producing high-quality, shelf-stable, healthy, real food designed to be taken with you on your next adventure. Because the meals are not dehydrated or freeze-dried, they have retained all the flavour, don't require any water to be added, simply heat and eat, or they can even be eaten cold. They have a broad selection of meals with many more being planned and cater for some allergies and diet options. The coconut ginger chicken is now my new favourite, and On Track Meals will be accompanying me on many future adventures. Welcome to this episode of Australian Hunting Backcountry. Thanks for following me along still. This is going to be the second part of the recording as a summary to my New Zealand trip back in May 2024. Now, this part of the hunt, I decided not to take my podcasting gear with me. I wanted to cut a bit of weight from my pack. And I found that the first half of the trip, the podcasting gear and trying to record and trying to even film was a bit too much of a distraction for me, and I really wanted to just concentrate on enjoying this part of the hunt without having to worry about producing content along the way and that sort of thing. So I made some notes on my phone throughout the hunt, so I'm going to refer to those and then give you a recount of the adventure that I went on for the second part. So if you listen to the first episode, you would have heard that I was then moving on to an area to do a podcast recording. And if you listen to the following episode, you would have heard that that was with the Weekend Mish Boys. So I had a great time with them, far too short, however, because they had commitments and I obviously had to keep driving on as well. So I would love to get back, spend a bit more time with them and see if we can work out to do a hunt together. That may be next year or even the year after sort of thing. But if you're not following those guys, please jump onto their YouTube channel. They have done some epic hunts already, and from what they're saying to me, they will be doing even more epic things in the future. So from Lake Hawea, I drove onto an area called Mount Potts. From there, I was planning on hiking up the Rangitata, which is quite a popular area for tahr hunting, chamois hunting and so forth. I had in my mind that I was going to sort of go past the hut. I wasn't planning on staying in the hut, but the option was there to stay in it if I needed to come back somewhere for a night for a break or get out of some weather or something like that. Now, where I wanted to launch from, you actually have to walk through some private property. And this is where the NZ Topo 50 app really comes into play, because it shows you by shading on the topo map the areas that are public and those that are private. So the last thing you want to do is go over there and hunt on somebody's private property, particularly because a lot of the private properties over there do actually lease out to guides and outfitters. So you don't want to sort of be caught trespassing and get in trouble and that sort of thing. The last thing you want to be doing in a foreign country, or the last thing you want to be doing at all, is poaching. But the last thing you want to be doing in a foreign country is getting caught poaching, albeit accidentally. But with this sort of technology, there is no excuses. I could only imagine the drama that you would have in a foreign country, having firearms seized and being charged and that sort of thing. So, because I was walking through quite a bit of private property, you can actually do it. You just need to ask permission. I think there are actually, the law over there does allow you to pass through there on your way to public land, but I think the done thing is to still ask for permission. So there was a property there that you could drive through. I couldn't drive through it in the car that I had because it wasn't a four-wheel drive, and there was a four-wheel drive track, and you really needed the four-wheel drive from what I was reading. There was quite a few creek crossings and just a bit of stuff to navigate that the camper van I had wouldn't be able to do. So I was going to have to walk. Anyway, through a bit of a lack of planning on my part, I didn't get the contact details of the property in time. So I couldn't reach anyone on the phone. So I ended up sending them an email. I had to drive back down the road, find somewhere with some phone service, send them an email, and therefore I couldn't leave that day. I wasn't comfortable leaving that day because I didn't want to be walking through somebody's property without them actually providing me with the consent to do so. So I ended up spending, instead of heading off that day, I ended up actually spending a night in a public car park nearby where you could camp overnight, and got the confirmation email, so planned to head off the next morning. That was all well and good. I got up nice and early. Now, I had to get up nice and early that day because I wanted to get away early, but in actual fact, the number of cars showed up in the car park because there were some fellas who were doing some work on a backcountry hut, and they had a helicopter booked for early that morning. So they arrived with their cars. I started unloading tools, bits and pieces and that sort of thing, waiting for the helicopter to arrive. So got out and had a bit of a chat to them. Because they flew over the area that I was sort of planning on going into, they gave me a few pointers and so forth. So that was great. That was worthwhile. However, I didn't end up getting away on time that day. I didn't even get away close to being on time that day. Because once again, I can't remember if I identified this in episode 1 of The Hunt, but one of the flaws that I identified was that you need to have systems in place for where you keep your gear. Particularly important gear like the keys for my gun box. So because it has to be locked away because it's in the car, for whatever reason, I didn't put them in the same place where they were supposed to go, and therefore I spent quite a bit of time that morning because I'd misplaced my keys. Therefore I couldn't get my firearm out, and of course that was a great big fuck up for the morning. So I managed to find the keys, eventually got away. I was really angry with myself for doing that again. But hopefully this is well and truly going to be imprinted in my brain now to not do this for the next trip. One of the things I would probably do for next time as a learning from that is to actually make some notes in my phone and say, this is where these keys go, this is where your wallet goes, this is where this goes, etc., etc. And that way I could always refer back to that. Instead of having to rack my brain and stop me, that would stop me putting them in a different place each time. And that was just a sort of general difficulty that I found in living out of the camper van, because I had a lack of foresight to keep putting things in these common places so that I would remember where they are, get in that habit. It's very difficult to form a habit in less than 3 weeks, but you know what I mean. Like I should know that if I was looking for these keys, that I would go to this part of the car or this particular bag or something like that. The helicopter landed very close to where the car park was, obviously for the convenience of the fellas that were there. But another lesson I learned is when there's a helicopter landing nearby, and I've been around helicopters before, so I know how much wind force there is from them. But when you have a helicopter landing nearby, go and close the doors to your car, particularly where you have a camper van like I had, where they have sliding doors on both sides. So I had both doors open on the side and then the rear door open. I was packing my bag at the back of the car, and the wind force just started blowing things straight out of the car all over the car park. So I had to quickly run around, slam the door shut. But anyway, that's how it is. So lesson learnt there too. So anyway, finally got myself away. The helicopter had been and gone, the guys that were doing the work. For this hunt, I had to walk up a riverbed quite a long way. Now, this was my first experience walking up a riverbed. The previous hunt, I'd been walking on walking tracks, so this was a very different experience. And because it's a working farm as well, there were some roads through where I first of all had to go through the private property. So that was great. So when I got onto a road, and I would follow the wheel tracks up, and that was great walking. So after I'd been walking for a little while, some of the farm hands came down in a quad bike, a quad side by side. Had a bit of a chat to them, told them what I was doing. They were all good. They said that they knew that I was going through the place, apparently, so the email definitely got through, and there were no dramas there. They were more than happy to help me out. I was kind of quietly hoping that they might have been able to offer me a lift, but obviously they were very busy that morning, so since it is a working farm. So they went their way and I went in the opposite direction. And when the four-wheel drive track sort of ran out, I thought it ran out. I started going in a different direction away from the track. That was when I realised how I wouldn't say difficult, but it was definitely a lot of work on my feet and ankles walking up the riverbed. Every rock is a different size. There was no consistency to anything there. So when you were putting your feet down, one ankle would be rolling one way, and then the next one would be rolling completely different way. Then and it was just that constant pattern of the stress on your ankles and your lower legs just trying to hold you up and stop you from tripping over. And this was again where the walking poles really came into their own. A number of times I was very heavily reliant in leaning on those to prevent myself from falling over. You can't just constantly walk on the top of rocks there either, because of the different sizing, and the other issue is that because of the weather over there, with everything being cold, anything that's in the shade is generally icy, so it's slippery. So you just can't trust standing on the top of the river rocks. So that was a big lesson for me there, and it slowed me down significantly. I'd knocked a bit of weight out of my pack because I felt that I was still too heavy going in to the first hunt. So this one, like I said, I didn't take the podcasting gear, so that took a little bit of weight out. There was a couple of other things I cut right back on, and I didn't carry a lot of water with me either. So because I'm walking up a riverbed, I can just drink along the way. But in my haste to get away that morning, I'd also misjudged the map. And like I think I said in the first episode, the distances over there are really deceiving. Everything, my perspective was just blown way out because everything is so much further. So when you look at a map, yes, there's a scale there, and you can measure something on the topo with the scale. But when you're actually on the ground, it just changes your whole perspective, and it throws it out. So for the first part of the day, I actually walked up the wrong riverbed. I took went the wrong way at a Y intersection basically, and ended up walking probably close to 5 k's by the time I turned around and had to walk back in the wrong direction. So again, really angry at myself for not paying attention. And the app, the NZ Topo 50 app, it actually tracks you as well. So it shows your position on the map all the time. And I could have quite easily fixed that problem, or not even experienced that problem if I'd referred back to that. But because I was sort of still stressed and angry from losing my keys in the morning, and I was running late, I just charged off and just, with determination, wanted to get where I needed to go as quickly as possible. So I thought I was doing the right thing. Anyway, walked a few unnecessary Ks. So I turned around, had to come back, had to go back through a few creek crossings and so forth, and got myself back on track. So that was another lesson for the day, was to just keep paying attention, keep checking in on the app, making sure you're in the right location. So following on from that, I ended up back on a four-wheel drive track in the property and managed to pick up my pace again, which was good and kind of distracted me from the events of the morning. So I was able to sort of put them out of my head, calm myself down again, and just come back to being present in the country and actually enjoying it. And just to give you perspective on when I say enjoying the country and being present, that area that I was in is actually part of where they filmed one of the large battle scenes in the Lord of the Rings trilogy. So if you watch those movies, you saw the fantastic country they were in, it's quite likely that's the country that I was actually in. And there's signs up around saying that this was where it was filmed. So that was quite interesting. But it was all absolutely beautiful, the countryside there. And it was very different to where I was on the first hunt over on the west coast. This was a lot more open, a lot less canopy. Everything was sort of less than 6 foot high, except for a very small, very thin belt around the base of the hills where some of the trees were a little bit taller. One of the bits of gear that I was testing on this trip, which I think I'll mention at this point because I got to use it several times because I took the wrong turn and had to backtrack and do some more creek crossings, was overboot waders. So the best way to describe them is they are single leg waders designed to slip over your boots and your pants, so you don't have to muck around taking boots off, replacing them with felt-soled boots, neoprene socks, that sort of thing. And it's just designed to cross water that is knee-high or thereabouts. So a couple of the creeks that I had to cross, they were definitely above. At one point, one was a little bit above my knee, and the force on it was quite significant. But I managed to get across without any drama. But if I was going to do that, so the other choices I had was to take my boots off, take my socks off, take my pants off, and put my Crocs on and cross the creeks that way. They weren't overly wide, these creeks, but they were, like I said, they were deep. Definitely over the top of my gaiters, so if I'd left my boots on and crossed just wearing my gaiters, I'm pretty sure that my boots would have ended up full of water. And I always like to try and keep my boots and socks as dry as possible for as long as possible. I know sometimes it just becomes unavoidable, and sort of towards the end of the hunt, you when you're walking out, you probably don't care as much because it's nearly over. But I just wanted to try these out to see how effective they were. Now the brand I had were just ones that I bought off eBay. They were just the thin poly, not very tough material. They had some extra sort of thickening pieces on the base of the feet, but I did find on each creek crossing I ended up puncturing them. So when I got over the other side, one of the waders was usually had a bit of water in it. Because the hole was only so small, it wasn't bad. It wasn't overly wet. It didn't come over the tops of my boots or anything like that, so it wasn't a problem. So in terms of the effectiveness of them, they were successful. They kept my socks and inside my boots dry, and all I had to do was just cut a little bit of tenacious tape, patch the hole when I got over the other side. Yeah, so the gear that was part of the gear that I was testing out. They are, because they're only cheap, they are a heavier version. I can't remember the weight off the top of my head, but a company in Alaska called Wiggies, they make a lighter version, so not necessarily cheaper, but definitely lighter, and probably out of some tougher material. But I have seen a number of guides in Alaska that use those for those creek crossings, and they're quite often talking about having to patch them up as well. So I don't think there's a indestructible sort of product out there that is suitable for backpacking. So you've just got to take that risk that you are going to puncture them, and just have a couple of patches there that you can stick on and fix them up. And I'll probably quite easily get half a dozen trips or more out of them, assuming I don't rip it and wreck it completely. Would I justify buying a set of Wiggies? Not at this stage, to be honest. I don't think, given the cost of purchasing it and then shipping it from Alaska, I don't think that would justify the difference and the weight penalty that I'm experiencing with these set. Will I take them on my next trip? Yes, I would. I actually truly think that they were worth it. They were a great bit of gear. The only thing I would do, what I found when they did leak and they took on water, is it made them heavy. It made the bottom of them heavy. And when I was trying to walk through the creek, I was dragging, they were being dragged down because of the weight of the water. So what I will probably do next time is get a piece of strap with a buckle, male-female buckle on it, and I will just put that around my ankle so that it kind of locks it off on my leg a bit more and doesn't allow it to be dragged down as much, and it should sort of help resolve a bit of that issue. The other thing I have thought about approaching some of the Australian garage gear hiking manufacturers and seeing if they thought that there was another material like maybe DCF that we could do something like that, and seam seal it, that sort of thing. That would obviously be quite expensive, but maybe that would be something worthwhile chasing up as well. The other reason I took them as well is that because I was walking up the riverbed, there's a sort of spiderweb network of creeks and tributaries and so forth flowing down there, and that part of the world is very, very affected by snowmelt and rain, that sort of thing. So the level of water can rise quite suddenly, and so if even though I might have been able to walk across a creek on the way up, doesn't necessarily mean it was going to be that same depth on the way out. So another reason I wanted those waders. So across the riverbed, the river flats, walking over the uneven rocks, and when I say uneven, I'm talking they were varying in size from probably, an atlas ball kind of size. So one of those jammed in the ground to fist-size rocks, and there was no sort of flat area, or very, very rarely was there ever a flat area where you could put your foot down. So it was always on some sort of inclination in one of the planes or multiple planes. So did get quite tiring, and it was quite slow going. So as I was tracking my pace for that first part of the day, at one point my average was 1.2 kilometers an hour. So if you're going to do something like this, you just need to take that in consideration, how far you have to walk, how far you're planning on walking to get somewhere, to make sure that you have plenty of time. So I found I could get up around the 2 to 2.5 on average, but there were some parts of the day where I was significantly slower, obviously. When I wasn't on the riverbed and on a four-wheel drive track, there were some raised sort of beds, I guess you could say, where soil had been dumped, and then grass was able to grow, and some of the shrubbery and so forth. And they were great ways to get up out of the riverbed, give your feet and your ankles a bit of a relax, and pick up a bit of pace. The only thing with these was the Matagari. So if you are not aware of what Matagari is, haven't experienced it, or if you have experienced it, you will immediately feel the pain. It is kind of, the only way to describe it is if barbed wire had angry sex with lantana. It is incredible bush. It is tough, it is sharp, and they grow, they interweave in one another, so they form this basically impenetrable barrier. And at one point on this trip, I tried to take a shortcut and ended up in a big patch of Matagari and had to get down on my hands and knees and crawl through some tunnels underneath it and actually drag my pack behind me. So yeah, that was an experience. But some of those patches of the raised bed, you kind of have to pick your way and weave your way through the Matagari. So you don't pick up a lot of speed in those sections because you're zigzagging so much. So I managed to get back onto quite a decent four-wheel drive track, which was, I actually found out afterwards, was the main sort of four-wheel drive track that went up to the first hut. And along the way, I ran into a couple of fellas who were in there in their four-wheel drive. They'd been doing a bit of hunting. They had permission to hunt on the private property, so they were still in an area that I couldn't hunt on. But I stopped and had a good chat to them. They looked at me like I was crazy, like, why are you walking in here? You can drive a car in. And when I explained the situation with my car and so forth, they thought that was quite amusing to them. But they were basically hunting tahr off the road. So they would drive along, try and spot the tahr up on the hills, shoot them from down below, and then one of them would go up and recover the animal. They were just there for meat hunting. Interesting couple of guys. And again, they were happy to share advice and experience and give me some tips, and just great. Again, I come back to the attitude towards hunters in New Zealand. It's completely different. It's just everybody's happy to help out and share information, and try and help out as much as they can. So I was really thankful I ran into them, and we shared a couple of laughs, and they were going to give me one of the beers out of the esky, but I decided not to take it because I wasn't sure how it had turned out by the time I got to camp. So the last thing I wanted was a beer can exploding in my pack or something like that. Yeah, so because of this day, I'd been away, gotten away late, took the wrong turn, and it was slower going than I thought. I didn't make it as far as I wanted to get on the first day, but I made it to one of the backcountry huts there. Um, Nice basic hut. I ended up doing quite a bit of walking in my headlamp. I could have camped on the flats, but I knew that there was a hut not far away, so I pushed on, walked in the dark, and got to the hut so I could, yeah, at least spend the night in a little bit of comfort. You know, it's there. Might as well use it. Saves you setting up a tent. However, there was at that hut. Normally, there's water tanks at the hut and little water tanks that collect some rainwater. However, at this hut, the rainwater tank had a leak, so there was actually no water there. So, because of where the hut was, it was tucked right sort of back up at the base of the hill. I had to go down to the river to try and get some water, and at night time, I had to go down quite a bit of a drop off, get some water because I hadn't been carrying very much water, and that was a bit of a pain in the bum. But anyway, I couldn't have predicted that was going to be the case. But the good thing was there was plenty of water around it. It's not like I was at risk of not finding any. I knew where it was. I could hear it. I just had to walk over there to it. I found at that time of year, I started losing light around 5:30 p.m. and it was pretty much pitch dark by 6:15. So you've got to bear that in mind too when you're trying to plan in getting somewhere. If you are going to be walking in your headlamp, there are some dangerous patches, so you've just got to be mindful of that you're not going to put yourself unnecessarily at risk, because the headlamp doesn't see where some of the holes are, and there was a couple of times that I stepped in a deep hole that I didn't realise was there, and it was only a sort of pothole or a little bit of a sinkhole or something or other, but I hadn't seen it, and came close to jarring my knees a couple of times. Could have easily injured myself, but thankfully I didn't. So keep that, if you're planning a trip, planning this sort of thing, keep that in mind. So the next day, got up out of the hut reasonably early, got myself away, cup of coffee, sort of sitting there and relaxing on the steps of the hut. It was very nice watching the light the sunlight starting to hit the hills, and that was the end of the 4-wheel drive track from there. So I was back into walking on the riverbed and trying to get up on those little banks that I was talking about as well, and picking my way along them. Because this was now further in, and I was now from this point into public land, so I was out of the private property, so the road wasn't as well maintained or anything like that, and from that point on, it was very much public land sort of style. So I walked on a few hours and came across another couple of hunters. Actually saw two fellas right over the other side of the river. They were hunting the other side from what I was on. So I was walking up the true right side. They were on the other side, and not far after seeing them, I came across another two blokes. Now these fellas were staying in the hut that was a bit further up, which was the hut that I'd sort of planned on going up past, and was going to use that as a backup, like I said, in case a weather system came through or something. And the other two blokes that I saw, they were with them. So these guys were elderly gentlemen. They had physical limitations, and I'll explain why this is significant later on. But they were literally just meat hunting. So they'd chop it into the hut, got dropped off, and they were literally just sort of walking the river flats and trying to hunt tahr that were up on the lower parts of the hills, so that they could shoot them. The hope was that they would roll down a significant way and they wouldn't have to walk too far up the hill, because they both sort of had bung knees, they were telling me, and couldn't walk very far up the hills. So stopped and had a chat to them, told them what my plans were, spoke about where I was from in Australia and that sort of thing, and where I'd walked from, and again they were thought that I was crazy. Why didn't I drive in? And then I had to explain that I didn't have the car that was capable, etc., etc. And then, of course, they thought, well, why didn't you fly in? And when I explained that, I couldn't afford the cost on my own, they thought, oh, yeah, okay, that's reasonable. So anyway, they weren't having much luck. They'd seen a few tahr, but they weren't having much luck in shooting one. They had another 4 or 5 days in the hut. They weren't too stressed. They were pretty casual. They were just there hoping to get onto a meat animal. But they did say to me, look, if you happen to see something, let us know, or happy to take, if you shoot something, we're happy to take some of the meat and that sort of thing. So after I left them, I kept going. I told them where I was planning on going, and they both agreed, whilst they hadn't been up there, because it was beyond their physical capabilities, they both agreed that there should be tahr up there, because that was going to be a good river system to go up, and definitely into the tahr country. So my enthusiasm was sort of revitalised. So I pushed on a bit more, got just past the hut. Now the hut was on the other side of the river, so I didn't bother crossing over and going and have a look. And anyway, they had all their gear there and so forth. And I should mention that the fellas did say to me on the walk out, stop in, spend a night with us. We got plenty of whiskey, plenty of beer, we'll feed you, that sort of thing. And so, they were just overly nice, very supportive, very happy to share, just completely in tune with that whole New Zealand hunting culture where, we're all sort of on the same team. So I came to another fork in the river now, and I wanted to go up off the main river and head up a different system. Now, I should also mention as well that one of the friends of the boys from the Weekend Mish, he handles some of their filming, he does some of their camera work and some of their social media stuff. I spoke to them about where I was planning on going for their second hunt, and they all agreed it was good country. And in fact, the young fella that does their filming and so forth, he was actually doing a trip in there a week or so after I was planning on coming out. So he was very enthusiastic to hear about what I thought of the place, and the fact that he had decided to go in there, a local had decided to go in there because it looked like good country, really sort of cemented my hope that this was going to be good country. Now, one of the things about going into this area, there was a walking track up there. It wasn't necessarily a maintained walking track, but they're obviously, because it's public land and it's very popular, obviously, quite a few people had been up this part of the world because there was a well-worn track up there. So for most of the time, I was able to sort of follow in the footsteps of other people. And I was glad that there was, because there was one point I came to where there was a cliff face right up against the creek that I was walking up. So the choice was I was either going to have to cross over, and it was reasonably significant, try and go up the other side for a bit and then cross back. But fortunately, like I said, obviously other people have been there. There was actually a rope tied on. So I was able to get up this and around this sort of rock face by climbing up this rock through over this rope. It was a bit sketchy. Definitely wouldn't have been able to do it without the rope there. So very appreciative that someone had put their hand in their pocket and donated this bit of rope so that people like me could benefit from it. So not far from there, and I at this point I wasn't too far. I was still only a couple of 100 meters up from the probably more than a couple of 100 meters, probably closer to a kilometer, maybe 600, 800 meters from the hut. I spotted my first tar for this part of the trip, and he was up the top of this scree slope. I knew that if I shot him, it was going to be an easy recovery. He was probably going to roll down most of the way. I got a quick look at him. I could see he wasn't super old, so it wasn't a trophy class, but given the experience that I'd had with those fellas that were staying in the hut, I thought this is a great opportunity to do them a favour. So grabbed my rifle. He didn't know I was there. I was able to settle in. It was a 185 metre shot, fairly steep angle, so took that into account and shot the tar. Died on the spot, rolled down the hill. I didn't have to go far up to recover him. I took a couple of photos. Had a bit of a struggle trying to get some photos where he was, because the even with a 10-second self timer, by the time I triggered it and then scrambled over the scree to get up and get in position behind him, I missed it a couple of times. So what I ended up doing was just setting up a video and then going and getting set up behind it and trying to sort of sit still for as still as possible for a couple of seconds, and then change the angle of the head and do that a couple of times. And then what I would do was take some screenshots from the video. So there's a bit of a tip. If you're on your own and you're struggling to get the photo, just take a video. So drag the tar down, got him in a nice flat spot, a grassy area, and went back to the hut. And I was going to leave the fellas a note there, but they were actually back at the hut. So I was able to let them know where the tar was that I'd shot, and that they were more than welcome to help themselves to it. They were absolutely over the moon, very thankful, and again extended the invitation for me to stop in on the way out, spend the night there, have a few drinks, meal, that sort of thing. So that was sort of going to be part of my plan. I asked them if they wanted me to gut it or anything for them, and they said no, because they were going to literally pack up. They're going to have a bite to eat and literally pack up and head up there and grab it. So I was able to mark it on the NZ Topo 50 app, and I was able to share that exact waypoint with them, so they knew exactly where it was. And interestingly, on my walk out, there was no remnants of the tar there, so they'd obviously gotten onto it and taken everything from it. So and given that area, there's no sort of land-based predators, like we have in Queensland. There's no wild dogs that would have taken off with the carcass or anything like that. I was fairly confident that those fellas got it, so I was very happy with that. So left them behind, got back up, picked up my pack, and continued walking. Now I was, from this point on, because I was, because I'd seen and shot that tar, I was really started concentrating on hunting from this point on. So I took it quite slowly and hunted along the way. So I'd walk to an area, I would sit down, glass the hill face for a bit, move on a little bit more. That would open up a little bit more of the hill face. I'd glass that a bit more. I shouldn't, not hill face. They were mountains. They were literally mountains. So I should put it in perspective. These were large, not large hills. These were mountains, but very open country. So not a lot of area for the tahr to hide in, but one of the things I noticed was how well they actually blended into the country there. So it took me a bit to get my eye in. Seeing that one on the scree slope, that was a very different experience because it stood out. It was quite obvious. But in the sort of alpine grassy areas and in amongst the rocks and so forth, they're very well suited to that sort of country. They blended in quite well. They don't necessarily move a lot, so with a lack of movement, they didn't jump out at you. So it took me quite a bit to get my eye in, but I was very excited from that point on. So, like I said, I took it slowly. So even though I took my time hunting all the way up, I still got to pretty much where I wanted to camp. I'm pretty much up the end of this creek system. There was a glacier sort of up and around the corner a bit more, and I found this really picturesque sort of flat area. I had a couple of large boulders around me, and a little creek, little feeder creek, sort of running, literally like 6 inches wide, but it was flowing quite freely. So I had good water source. I felt like I had good shelter behind these boulders, should a storm blow in or something or other. It wasn't the biggest space at all, but it was big enough for me and my little setup. So that was where I ended up staying, even though it wasn't quite as far as I had sort of planned on going. It was getting late in the day, and I was really comfortable there. So I thought it'll do for now, and if I decided I needed to move in the future, then I would do so, but that worked out well. So set up the camp, got some water filtered. Now, even though I've seen plenty of people drinking straight from the streams in New Zealand, they don't bother filtering anything like that, I still filtered because there's just no guarantees, and an animal could have died further upstream, or who knows. But that was what I wanted to do. If you don't want to take a filter or waste your time doing it or whatever, you roll the dice. I did what I was comfortable with. I really had a great little spot there. It was protected. I could glass from camp. I had good access to the mountains around me. So yeah, I was very happy, and bear in mind that I'm learning as I'm going. Like every footstep, you're learning something new basically about this country and how to hunt it. So that was pretty much that day done and dusted. So the next morning I got up. Didn't bother getting up super early because I didn't have to move from there, and I needed to wait until I had some good light so I could start glassing. So I took it pretty easy in the morning, allowed myself a little bit of a sleep in, a little bit of a recovery, got set up with the binos and the tripod, and just started glassing the mountains around me. And like I said, it took me a bit to get my eye in, and the distances were really deceptive. So because the distance is out, then your perspective is out. So I know roughly how big a tahr is and the colouring and that sort of thing. So initially I started off looking for the colouring that sort of was going to match what I was trying to focus in on. But because my perspective was out, what I realised eventually when I saw one was that they were much smaller. The things I was looking for were too big. So they were much smaller. And this again highlighted to me, first of all, the importance of being able to glass off a tripod. If you're going into that country and you don't have a tripod, you are doing yourself a real disservice. The only caveat to that would be if you had the stabilized binos like the SIG kilos, they would be super advantageous, and I'm considering looking at a set of those for my next trip, depending on finances. But either way, it'll either be a tripod or a set of those, and that glassing off the binos off the tripod made all the difference. Then I started seeing them, and then they started standing out. And as soon as I got my eye dialed in, I was able to spot them and try and work out how huntable they were. The second thing that this highlighted to me was that my spotting scope was inadequate. So when I wanted to, the binos were not enough power to judge the size of them, except for the fact that I could obviously see the golden part of the mane. And from what I'd been told, the further down the body the gold went, the more that was an indicator of maturity on the bulls. So that was sort of possible with the binos, but when it came to trying to see horn length and even focusing in to try and get a better indication of the length of that mane, that's where a good spotting scope would have really come into its own. So the one I had was only, I think, a maximum of 30 power, and it was inadequate for that area. It was nice and small and compact, and it suited my needs up until that point. But if I could encourage you to make a purchase before you go to New Zealand, it is to invest in a decent spotting scope with good magnification range. So something in probably at least the 50 to 60 power with a 65 or 80 mil objective. And a good tripod. So even when I had the spotting scope on the tripod, because of the tripod I have, because I'm using my walking poles, it wasn't super stable. So it really identified to me that I probably needed to pick up in those two areas of gear. So I spotted that day. I spotted one mob of tar, and there were 3 reasonable bulls in it. One of them definitely was the more mature one, and he was probably worth a bit of a closer look. There was a few nannies around, and they were pretty sort of content just hanging out on this side of the mountain in the sun, doing what they do. There were a few young ones around. They were sort of bouncing up and down the mountain, so they were pretty cool to watch. I should point out, I didn't end up spotting them until sort of close to midday. So I decided that I was going to walk back downstream a little bit, check out another mountain face, and leave those ones alone for the moment, just to sort of explore some other options. So packed up a bit of gear just in case I decided to go and do a bit of a hunt, and walked back downstream the way that I'd come from, set up again a tripod, glassed another mountain face, and picked up a few more tar. So I was super happy at that stage. I'd spotted, I think, somewhere around the 10, 11 tar between the two groups. And it was just cool to be able to watch them. I tried to get a bit of phone scope footage through my spotting scope, just to share on social media and with friends and family. It wasn't great. Again, if you want to do that sort of thing, if you want a phone scope, you're going to need a better setup than what I had. So, so I didn't bother doing too much filming. Glassed a few other faces. I walked in the afternoon. I walked a bit further upstream and glassed some different hillsides. I sort of glassed the ones that were getting the afternoon sun, just to see if there was something different over there. But lot of the faces as well where there were scree slopes or exposed area, so ones that didn't have grass on it, I was looking for contouring tracks. So if there'd been tar, if tar had walked over there and they would have left a telltale sign of tracks, disturbed soil, that sort of thing. I thought I found one on one face, so I spent a bit of time glassing that area because there was a little bit of shrubbery over there. There was a really good looking sort of, gully head there that would have held some bulls quite easily. And given what I'd seen on the west coast, I had an idea that maybe there was a bull there. I didn't end up seeing anything, but you could be looking all day and then all of a sudden one will appear. So spent a bit of time looking over there. Sun went down and I decided the next day if I spotted those tar again, I was going to go up and have a look at the bulls that I'd seen, the first mob of bulls that I'd seen. They were definitely worth a closer look. I was really looking for something in the 12-inch range. So I'd kind of set myself a bit of a benchmark that I wanted to stick to. I didn't want to go over there and just shoot a tar for the sake of shooting a tar. I realised that the trophy is not necessarily in the inches, the hunt and the experience and all of that goes into it as well. But just in terms of respect for the animal, I wanted to set that benchmark at 12 plus inches as best as I could guesstimate on the hoof. And so that was, I was happy that I'd seen tar. I was happy to go home basically empty-handed with that sort of benchmark in place. So one of the tricks that I was told, one of the two tricks that I was told in terms of measuring the tar, the horns and the tar, was first of all about measuring the box method. So what this is if you size up the base of the horns and then you square that so that you have a square in the first part of the horn, and then you sort of multiply that out a number of times. If you can fit 3 of those boxes in the horn, then that sort of indicates it's around the 11-inch mark. Now, I may have gotten that wrong because I did study it a little while ago and I'd have to refresh my memory on it, but that kind of indicated that, it was around the 11-inch mark, so that then the length of the tip over and above that sort of governed how much further it was past that. So you're sort of looking for 3 of those boxes and then, an inch or more protruding past that. The other method that I had been told was to, when you're looking at them side on, and this is all very dependent on making sure you've got a good square sort of side on view of them. If you draw a line over the top of the eye, directly across the top of the eye and directly across the top of the ear, and if the tip protrudes past that line, then you're looking at something around the 11.5-inch mark. So again, how far it protrudes past that line and what angle you're on and so forth depends how much past 11 inches, 11.5 inches it was. So that was something else that I was trying to keep in mind. But from where I was on the ground, I had no chance of doing either of those measurements, and the phone scope and the spotting scope didn't allow me to take a photograph where I could do that as well. So I had to get up closer. So I planned the trip for the day. I got up in the morning. Like I said, the plan was if they were still in the morning, I was going to make the climb, get up there and have a closer look at them. So I got up in the morning, eventually found them again. They were in a slightly different area, but still roughly the same sort of face. 3 bulls, confirmed the 3 bulls were there again, and then sat down with the NZ Topo app and tried to plan out how I could get up there, being mindful of the wind direction, the topography of the area, so making sure I didn't get bluffed out, and not get spotted by the animals. So I eventually picked a path, packed up some gear and headed off. Now the first part of the climb up was up a bit of a landslip, and the country up there, the mountains up there have a very shallow top layer, and this landslip was really hard going because every time I put my foot down, there was nothing solid there to get a grip on to launch off from, to take the next step. So it was almost 3 steps forward, 2 steps backwards. In fact, at some points, I'm pretty sure it was 2 steps forward and 3 steps backwards. And I struggled to make headway going up there. It was hard going. I made progress. I got up there, but then I got to a point where it got really steep, like not quite vertical, but I was hands on the mountain face the whole way up to help me get up. And this was sort of where I ended up getting a little bit stuck, and a little bit of the pucker factor happened, because all of the shrubbery up there is literally growing in about an inch of topsoil. They have no roots. There is nothing there for them to really anchor in on. So consequently, when you're reaching up and you're trying to find something, a hand grip of some sort, everything pulls out. It just pulls away. So it was a bit of a struggle, and I got to a point where I actually thought I kind of got stuck. So I couldn't go up, I couldn't go down, and the only thing to do was to try and side hill around. But I had nothing to grip onto to be able to lift my foot. I was worried if I was lifting my foot, I was going to slide, and I literally thought to myself, today's the day that you're going to get really badly injured. I actually contemplated unbuckling my pack and dropping that so I didn't have that weight pulling me down, and maybe that was going to help me sort of get out of the situation. It obviously meant that I was going to have to then back out of there and go back down and pick up my pack, and who knows how far it was going to fall. And that was not ideal because I had my rifle on my pack. Now this was where, so on this part of the trip, this hike up the mountain, I didn't take my walking sticks, but I took the MTN stick. And this was where it really came into its own. So after a couple of attempts, I was able to get the stick, the sort of ice pick part of the stick, into a section of ground that was deep enough and solid enough that I could actually then use that to pull myself up on. And I started stepping my way around and eventually got onto some more solid ground. But it was a matter of getting that secured, making sure it wasn't going to give way, because it gave way a couple of times. So I had to make sure I had enough purchase there to get myself confident enough to move. I would move a bit, take it out, find something else to put it into, make sure it was secure, and then, move. So bit by bit by bit, I moved around, got myself out of that situation. this was maybe where, I could have done a bit more research on mountain safety, that sort of thing. I'd looked at a few online courses. I'd done a couple of online courses about using ice axes in the snow and that sort of thing, for self-arrest. But none of it sort of covered this. I wasn't in the snow. I was in just really loose, really insecure sort of gravelly soil. So anyway, that was very interesting, but then I realised once I got myself out of that I was not going to be able to go down that way, safely go down that way. So I thought, well, that's a problem for later, but I kept that in the back of my mind because the last thing I wanted to be doing was walking down off this mountain under a headlamp. So I needed to make sure that whatever I was doing, I was going to do it in time if I was going to shoot something, I was going to have to make sure I had time to get back down off the mountain. So, but anyway, lesson learnt, and another big shout out to to Matt from Mountain Gear for creating the mountain stick. I really do feel that saved me at that point from getting seriously injured or worse. So I was very happy to have that bit of gear there. So the other thing that I'd done from down the bottom as well is on the NZ Topo app, I'd marked where I thought the tar were. So you dropped a waypoint onto the app. So once I got myself sort of secure and on sort of solid ground, I checked the app to see where I was in relation to where I'd last seen the tar or where I thought they were last. I was still good. I still couldn't see any. So I was pretty confident that I hadn't been seen. But the perspective changed. So how the country looks from down below compared to how it is up there is very different. It was a lot steeper than I thought it was. So I was very much at a disadvantage because the tar were right above me, which meant that they had the visibility advantage over me, and they would have been able to see me coming if I'd stepped out in the wrong way or sort of skyline myself or something like that. So I was very mindful of that from that point on. So I kept as low as I could. I would move a little bit and then check with the binos up on the ridge and make sure that there weren't any sentry nannies standing up there looking down, spotting me, anything like that. Took me quite a while to get around. I still had a couple of 100 meters to go. Took me quite a while to sort of get around there. Up there were a few pads that had been worn in, obviously by the tar. So I had much better footing. I felt much more secure up there. I was a long way up at this stage. I was up around, my vertical elevation from that point was probably up around the 1400 meter mark, above from where camp was. So I climbed a fair way up and got myself into this really, really good little spot. There was a bit of erosion, so I was able to sort of sit down in like this dugout kind of setup and glassed up and managed to spot a couple of nannies. So I knew that the bulls were going to be around because the bulls were kind of acting pretty ruddy, that lip curling, tongue out sort of behaviour. So I knew that the bulls weren't going to be far from the nannies. I didn't want to move on any further because I had a really good spot. I felt confident to be able to shoot from there, and if it was just going to be a matter of patience for the bull to step out. I had good visibility. I had a good range of country that I could glass, so it was just going to require some patience, I felt at that stage. So took my pack off, got my rifle out, got the bipod on, got my bag, the Alpine Accuracy bag, rear bag that I took with me, set the rifle up, just in position in case something happened quickly. I wanted to be ready to go. and I was able to lean back, and just glass and glass and glass. And I watched these nannies that sort of came and went, and another one had come pop out in a different area. So I knew that if I moved, I was really going to be at risk of getting spotted. And then the alarm was going to be sounded, and I was done with. So I was probably there for, it felt like half an hour. When you're trying to be patient and so forth, it probably wasn't. It probably felt like longer than it actually was, but I'm pretty sure it was sort of around the 20-minute mark. And then, unfortunately, one of the worst things, well, maybe not the worst thing that could have happened, but anyway, what I didn't want to have happen happened. A helicopter flew in up the valley. Now, as you're probably aware, if you know anything about New Zealand, you'll know that they helicopter cull the tahr. So they have learnt that sound of the rotor coming in is not a good thing. And sure enough, this chopper came around up the valley, went up to the head of the valley, circled around, and came right up past where I was. Now, I don't know whether there's any sort of code of ethics or code of conduct or something with helicopter pilots. I can't guarantee that he saw me. I wasn't wearing blaze orange or anything like that. I had camouflage on. I had a green hat. I don't know if they did it on purpose because they saw the tahr and wanted to come by and have a look at them or something or other. But there were hunters in that chopper. I know that because I saw they flew close enough for me to be able to see the pilot and the guy in the back seat on the pilot on the side, the rear seat on the side, and he had blaze camo on, and I know it was blaze camo because they flew that close that I could see the pattern of it. So sure enough, they flew in, came by. I turned around, I looked at them, I threw my hands up, sort of in disbelief, like, come on, guys, seriously. Again, I don't know that they saw me, but super pissed off at that point there because, of course, I turned around and there were no tahr to be seen. They flew out of that valley system. They went back down around the corner. So I can only assume that maybe they saw my tent, saw somebody was in there and decided not to go in there. Again, I'm only speculating here. I don't know if they saw the tahr. I don't know. I have heard stories about some pilots spotting tahr and then hazing them, what they call hazing them, and pushing them out of that area and towards the area where they were going to drop hunters off. I'm not saying that happened here, but I'll leave it at that. I was super pissed off at that stage. So I let it settle down for a while. I sort of sat down. I had something to eat. Hoped that maybe the tahr had just kind of gone over the other side of the mountain, popped over the ridge, and maybe if I left it long enough, they might come back, or they might just be over the other side. So had a bite to eat, had a drink, grabbed my gear, threw my pack on, and very slowly sort of made my way up to the ridge, glassing the whole way, trying, hoping that tahr were going to be there. Didn't see them, so I thought, well, I'm close enough now. I'll get up to the top, and I will just very cautiously peek over the top in case they have just gone and sheltered over the other side. Got up to the top, crawled over, so I was very mindful not to skyline myself. Glassed the other side as much as I could. It opened up into another creek system, another valley. Tahr were nowhere to be seen. So I wandered around for a bit. I glassed down a little bit. I walked on a bit further and sort of glassed down in case they'd run downhill instead of running over the top. and I couldn't see any of the tar. They were gone. They were boogied out of there. Which kind of fueled the rage. But anyway, it was pretty cool being right up the top there. I took a little bit of footage, walked along the ridge for a bit. It was a bit of a knife edge, so it was all very cool. But then I decided that I probably would just go back to camp and then glass around again, walk downstream a little bit more, walk glass again, see whether I could pick up some more tar. Maybe they'd run down there. Had to plan my escape off this hill now. So obviously the way that I'd come up, I decided I wasn't going to go back down there. It wasn't safe. Found a bit of a sort of gut that ran down and looked like it was going to be a good route out. Now, at this point, I decided to put on the micro spikes that I had. I should have, in hindsight, put them on for the walk up. They would have been invaluable. So I regret not doing that. When at that point I got to where I was stuck, I probably would have felt a lot more confident and had better grip with my boots if I'd had the micro spikes on. So threw them on for the walk down, and they were invaluable. So that's probably another bit of gear that I would suggest you look at purchasing. They're not light, but they are well and truly worth the investment and the weight penalty that you're going to be carrying. The set that I had was a set of Gravel. They came with a Velcro strap that sort of went over. So they were elasticized around the boot, and then they had a Velcro strap that went over the top part of your foot. They don't make them anymore. I've tried to search for them online. They don't make those ones anymore. I found another set, I think they're Saliwa, that are very similar to that. All of the other ones that I've seen don't have that anymore. They're just elasticized. Now, I mention this now in case I forget to come back to it, but somehow I actually broke one of the links underneath the spikes. So when I got back on the walk out, I noticed they were one of the on one side of the boots, it was sort of moving around and it was fitting funny, and I didn't bother checking it out at the time. I got back to camp. When I took them off, I realized that one of the links had broken. I've no idea how to do this because these things are like the steel in them, you would struggle to pull the link apart with two sets of pliers. So I've no idea how I did it, but anyway, the link broke off and it didn't pull out of the elastic. It broke off from one side of the chain to one of the plates. Since coming back, I've sent photos of it to Gravel to see whether we can get it repaired or whether there's, what the warranty is or whatever. I had heaps of trouble trying to get onto someone. I contacted them on social media. I contacted through their website. I eventually sent an email with a complaint saying, hey, I've tried to contact you guys for all these different ways. Nobody has gotten back to me. And this was months later. What do I need to do? Eventually, the email got flicked down to the Australian distributor for Gravel. They got back to me. They said, we've never seen this before. Not sure how we're going to go fixing it. I will get onto head office over in wherever it is, one of the European countries, and we'll get back to you. So this was probably July, maybe August. It's now November. I still haven't heard back from them. I sent them a follow-up email last month and said, I haven't heard from you. Have you had any luck? The response was no, we're still waiting for a reply. So I'm not shit canning them. The product worked well. Why mine broke, I've no idea. Like they said, they've never seen this before, so I'm sure they're very well made. They do make good quality gear. However, their customer service left a lot to be desired for, and their after sales servicing and warranty leaves quite a bit to be desired for. So, walked out down this sort of gut, and this because it was sort of over the southern side of the face now, I think because of the lack of sun exposure, the grass and so forth, there was a lot more grass there. It felt a lot more secure underfoot. I didn't have the big gravel scree slope like I had on the other side. So I was able to sort of walk down this very gingerly at some points, but with those micro spikes on, I felt a hell of a lot more secure walking down this way. There was a couple of parts there where I didn't get cliffed out, but it was really steep. And so what I did was I took my pack off, and I carry a piece of paracord with me, and I lashed the paracord onto the handle on the back of the pack, and I would lower my pack down and then follow without the pack on, because sometimes what was happening, because the country was so steep, you're walking and you're facing forward and you're sort of going down these parts where you've got to take a bit of a leap of faith, and you're kind of airborne for a little bit. And because the country's so steep, your pack would hit the rock face, so it would kind of push you forward. So when you leap down, you're expecting your feet to land in a certain area and be upright, and you would kind of get a bit of a shove in the back. So a couple of times there, I almost toppled forward, and my feet didn't land where I wanted them to, and it was just because it was unexpected. I ran the risk of either falling forward, tumbling down the hill, or landing awkwardly and so forth. So I only did that a couple of times, learnt my lesson, and then I would take my pack off and lower it down. Where it was only a short drop, I would just use the mountain stick, hook that into the handle on the back of the frame, extend the stick out, and just use that to sort of feed it down, lower it down, and then unhook it and so forth. So again, that was another really handy use of that stick. Anyway, found my way out of there. There was a lot of tar sign over that side of the hill. A lot of droppings, a lot of tracks around, and obviously because there was a lot more feed over there too. So I kept that in mind for the following day. Got down to the bottom, and I walked up that system a little bit. I was mindful of the time because it was getting on in the afternoon. And again, I didn't want to sort of be walking out somewhere strange under headlamps. So I still didn't know. I still had, another creek. I had to walk down this creek system that was unfamiliar to get back to camp. So I didn't want to run the risk of getting jammed up somewhere. So I walked up a little bit just to get a bit of a better view of the creek head. And it was all snow up there. There was, and I thought I saw some tracks sort of in the snow, so I thought maybe they went up that way. But anyway, I didn't spend a lot of time going up there, so I walked out, leaving my my micro spikes on. I wanted to test them out on the rocks in the creek. So generally the rocks in the creek where there was water splashing on it and so forth, I found them to be a little bit slippery. But I was also mindful of things icing over because I was in the sort of shade of the hill. And to my surprise, the micro spikes worked really well on the rocks. And this was possibly where I broke that link. I can't be sure, but this was definitely where I noticed it because one of them sort of started slipping around to the side of my boot. So I knew something was up with them, but I persisted. They worked well enough to get me out of there. So I had to pick my way through. I had to cross over that little stream a couple of times because I got, bluffed out, big rocks, big boulders. So I'd come around, I'd sort of scrub bash for a bit, or I'd have to climb up and come around and so forth. Anyway, it's quite an effort to get out of there, but it went well with with no major dramas. There was a couple of times again, I might have slipped, or there was no footing. I put my foot down into a patch of moss or something like that, thinking that it was going to be secure, and when my weight went onto it, it wasn't, and it was hollow underneath, so I dropped down into that. So you just got to be mindful of those sort of things, and it's tough on your body, and there's a real potential for risk of injury there. So I got back to camp. I still had a bit of daylight left, so I dropped my pack and just grabbed my binos and tripod, and I walked downstream a little bit and just glassed some other faces, hoping that I would see something. But where I'd seen tar before, they weren't there, and I didn't see any in the other faces. So still fuming a little bit over the whole helicopter thing, but I thought tomorrow's a new day. Hopefully, they would have relaxed a bit. They'll come back. We'll see how it goes tomorrow. So I got up the next day, back to glassing, and the short version is I did not see anything. I wandered up and down, went sort of back up a bit further, hoping maybe the tar had come back into that gully system that I walked out of. I didn't walk all the way back up in there because I was going to be too close. They would have seen me if I'd walked up in there. But anyway, I didn't see anything that morning, and it kind of stung a little bit. And I wanted to blame the helicopter. So I made the decision that day that I would walk back downstream towards that hut, and I thought maybe I would glass all along the way, because there was a couple of other creek systems a bit further down, a bit closer to the hut. I was pretty confident that the fellas in the hut weren't going to come up that way, so I thought I was going to have that all to myself. So I thought maybe I'll break camp, I'll walk down there a couple of hours. If I see something in the afternoon, I'll set up camp. I knew there was another little flat area there, a good little camp spot, so I could set up there, hunt from there the next day, and just sort of play it by ear. So I did that. I broke camp. So as I walked out on this day, and I was glassing into these other creek systems and thinking about where I was going to camp and so forth, another two helicopters buzzed up the valley, did exactly the same thing, flew up, circled around, did a U-turn, and then buzzed out again. They weren't together. They were at different stages during the day. So I guess that just sort of cemented for me that there was no point in me staying in this gully, because it was more than likely going to be devoid of animals, and I was probably going to be wasting my time staying there. So I made the decision then to really push on, push myself out and get out to that hut as early as I could, and maybe there was hunting opportunity down there. I wasn't going to know, but I knew that there was no point in me hanging around there anymore. Again, I probably let that kind of emotionally affect me a little bit too much. I did get the shits by it, but this is hunting public land in New Zealand. That's what I came to realise. There's helicopters everywhere. If I'd had the money, I probably, maybe would have been in one of those helicopters. Who knows? So if I'd been in one of those helicopters, I might have pissed off somebody else. But at that point in time, I really let it affect me. So that was what drove me to change my mindset and make the decision to walk out from there. And I'm just going to hunt my way back, see if I can see anything, go back to the hut, spend the night there, and walk out the next day if I don't see anything. And that was going to leave me a couple of spare days. I'd sort of planned on walking out, staying in there another couple of days, and then walking out and doing the drive back to Christchurch, unpacking, the next day, then flying out. But ended up obviously fueled by the rage and the lack of animals. I walked out of there, hunted sort of on the way out, glassed as much as I could, but didn't spend a lot of time glassing if I wasn't seeing something fairly soon, because by that stage too, my eyes were pretty well dialed in, so I was fairly confident that if there was something was there, I was going to be able to spot it. I didn't spot anything. I didn't bother walking up any creek systems. And yeah, I just really lost my motivation at that stage. Like I said, the mental game kind of was happening, and yeah, decided that I was going to walk out. So I did end up stopping in and seeing the fellas in the hut. I regret doing that now in hindsight. I wish I had have. They were obviously still there, because when I walked past, there was smoke coming out of the chimney. So I thought I'll punch back to that hut, and I'll spend the night there, and then walk out the next day. Anyway, I made pretty good time getting back to the hut. So much so, and again, fueled by the rage, I thought, bugger it, I'm just going to walk out tonight. I'm just going to do the whole way back. I know where the four-wheel drive track is now. I know I can walk back on that, go back through the property, and make it back to the car. So basically that's what I did. It was reasonably uneventful on the way out. Got back to the hut. I stopped and had a break for a bit, took my boots off, just sort of caught some sun, let my feet sort of relax for a bit, sun out, dry my socks out a bit. And then just kind of punched out of there. So I ended up walking in the dark, and I was confident that I could do that because I knew I was going to be on the four-wheel drive track. Followed that out. I actually lost it at one point going over the sort of spider web of the riverbeds. I didn't bother when I came to the creek crossings. I didn't bother stopping and putting on the waders, because I knew I was going to be back at the car that night, and that was pretty much going to be the end of the hunting trip for me. So if I had wet socks, that didn't worry me. So I got out of there, I walked back through the property in the headlamp all the way back to the car, down the main road. Got back to the car, just crawled into bed basically that night. I think I had a quick bite to eat. I had a on-track meal left in the car, so threw some on-track spaghetti bolognese over some 2-minute noodles. Threw that down and into bed. Got up the next morning and drove out to town. I thought I'm going to go grab myself a coffee, sit in a cafe, lick my wounds, maybe go back to Christchurch to be a tourist for a couple of days, or, just do something sort of touristy. So drove out of there, went back to the town called Ashburton. Really nice little town, and there was actually a coffee shop that opened quite early, because I got up at sparrow fart, drove out of there an hour or so back to the town, found this cool little cafe, sat there, had a nice coffee, had a couple of coffees, piece of banana bread, and then sat on my phone using their free Wi-Fi and just Googled things to do around the area, and there were some hot pools and a couple of other things that I thought about doing, and then I thought I need to buy my young fella a present. So there was a hunting and fishing store in town. Didn't open until 9 a.m, so I had a few hours to kill. So I just sat there looking at a bit of social media, Googling stuff, contemplating what I was going to do. And then as soon as the hunting and fishing opened, I drove over there. It wasn't far to go. Wandered around that shop, had a look at some of the gear, looking for a present for my son. Grabbed something and just explored what other gear they had there, just in case there was was something good, because there's always good to learn from the trip, and sometimes on the way out, you end up buying a bit of gear because you realise that might have been useful on this trip, so you'll buy it for the next trip. And anyway, I'm sitting in the car park with the engine running, and I'm about to drive off, and I look over and there's this beat up old four-wheel drive with all these hunting stickers over it, and the license plate was IC, as in the letter C, tar. And I thought, I probably need to go and have a chat to this fella. So I went over, and the bloke, he was sitting in his car trying to work out his headlamp. He'd just bought a new headlamp. I was trying to work out how to get it set up and so forth, and I had a similar model, so I helped him out. Had a bit of a chat to him anyway, introduced ourselves, and it was Sam Kelly. So Sam, and the last name is Caley, is actually a tar guide in the local area. And I'd spoken to Sam many years ago via email, pre-COVID, about the possibility of going over there and doing a guided hunt with him. So immediately recognised his name, got chatting to him, talked about hunting in Australia, hunting over here. I told him what had happened with the helicopter and so forth. He actually gave me a spot to go and hunt. He said, if you've got a couple of days left, this is what I would do. Punch in here. It's a good 4-hour walk. It's all uphill, but it's easy to do. There's a hut at the top. Don't bother taking any camping gear. Just spend the night in the hut, and hunt the mornings and afternoons. And he gave me sort of red hot tip on where to go. And he said, I've been in there over the years, and he said I've shot a couple of 13-inch balls out of there. So this spot was actually bordering private property, and they do some hunts on the property. And what happens is, when they get a bit of pressure, the bulls come over the ridge and go and hide out in this little public spot. He said there's a lot of day hikers up there, so you just got to be mindful of that. But it's all hunting area there, so you should see tar in there. So, armed with this new information, I still had some enough food left over, so I hightailed it out of there, drove over, found where I needed to go, and jumped out, set up my gear, and punched in. And because it was still early in the morning, I was sort of up there towards the afternoon. And got into the spot, and again the Topo 50 app showed me where the boundaries of this area was. So I knew I got into the right area. I knew I was on public land. I knew I was okay to hunt there, even though there were quite a few day hikers up there, and everybody was super friendly. Nobody was at all offended that a guy was walking in there with a rifle on his backpack. Everybody, wanted to stop and have a chat. Hey, good luck. There's definitely tar up there. It was all super friendly, and one of the things that I fell in love with about New Zealand. So I got up there in time to do a bit of an afternoon glassing session. Saw a young tar up there at that time, which was super encouraging, because obviously there were tar there. Pretty sure it was a nanny as well. So again, really encouraging seeing nannies, because if there's females, then there's going to be boys. And then it got a bit dark, so I headed out to the hut to spend the night there. Now this hut didn't have a stove in it, so it was a pretty cold night, which was okay. I was happy with that. But if you are going to spend nights in huts, now they didn't have any mattresses in this hut. It obviously wasn't set up sort of for overnight or multi-day trips like the other huts I've been in, where they come with mattresses. But that's okay. I had my airbed there, so I stretched that out on the bench, Slept on that. It was comfortable enough, and it was easy to do and so forth. So that was great. I really enjoyed that. Next day, got up nice and early, and while I was up packing my gear ready to head out, there was a knock on the door, and 3 hunters had walked up that early that morning. They came up to see who was in the hut. Stopped and had a good chat to them. They were all actually Germans who were living over there, and they were going into sort of similar area to where I was planning on going into, but they wanted to hunt a lot lower down. They said, we're only here for meat. We'll hike in. We go right down the bottom because we know that there'll be tar down there. They've been in there regularly, shoot tar in there. They said, you'll hear a few shots. We'll take an animal each, pack it out. They said, we'll be gone by midday. So you're more than welcome to go in there after midday. But as long as you're not sort of shooting downhill, you shouldn't worry us. I told them where I was planning on going, and they were super happy with that. So really nice people. They wanted to help me out, wanted to point me in the right direction, and happy to share waypoints with me as well. And they just, with the caveat that, I couldn't go there until after midday if I hadn't had any luck. So I left. I stripped a lot of weight out of my pack. I didn't take all my sleeping gear and all my food and so forth. I just took enough for the day hunt. Left it in a wet bag and a dry bag, and just left it under the bench in the hut. And I left a note on it as well, saying I'll be back around dark. Just so people didn't think it was abandoned gear or anything like that. Apparently this is sort of fairly commonplace. So hiked out of there, went down this ridge, which bordered the private property and the public land. Got myself into my first glassing spot and saw within not long at all, I saw what I thought was a cracker of a bull. He was a bit too far away for a shot, but still close enough that with the glassing setup, the binos and the spotting scope, I really liked him. I really liked the look of him, and I thought definitely worthwhile getting over closer, getting myself into a position so I can A, first of all, size him up, and B, take a shot. Now this was all tussocky sort of grass area, and then in the gullies there was some shrubbery growing, and apparently what they do was they get into the gullies and they sort of hide in there, settle down for the day, chew their cud, and just shelter in there because that area doesn't get helicopter shot because it's so small and because it's so popular with the public. So had to climb back up, sort of go along the ridge, and then go back down another finger ridge. And the trick was to obviously stay out of sight so I wasn't skylined, get myself down to where I thought I was roughly going to be on contour with the where I'd last seen the tar. And again, the NZ Topo app, I was able to mark where I'd last seen him, so I knew where I had to sort of get to, and I was going to be within about a 600 meter range, hopefully. I got over there, got myself set up, got the glassing set up, and got my rifle set up. Started glassing, and I just couldn't find him again. Couldn't find that one again. So I spent a long time just slowly glassing because there was a lot of areas there for them to hide in. They could quite easily sort of tuck back in under something, and you would really have to be looking right at them when they moved to notice them. So it's quite challenging. Even though it was open, it was still quite challenging. But anyway, I ended up turning up another bull with 2 nannies. So because there were nannies there, I thought, okay, where there's girls, there's going to be boys this time of year. So I stayed in that spot and I just glassed and glassed and glassed until my eyes bled, hoping that I would see this what looked like to be quite a dominant bull, because the bull I was looking at did not look to be that old or that big. So I thought, well, chances are the older one's probably going to come over, maybe beat this fella up a bit, steal the girls, take him off, do his thing. That was the sort of mindset I was in at the time. So it was all very encouraging. So I stayed there glassing, kept watching them, glassing around, glassing more. I heard some gunshots going off, so obviously the three German people had some luck. Even though I should point out, even though they all had, or two of them had suppressors, the shots were still very audible. So anybody that's worried about, suppressors and the use of them in Australia, they don't. Calling them a silencer is wrong. They are not silencers. They just suppress the sound. They don't make it silent at all. But anyway, they obviously had a bit of luck. They had a bit of a dust up. Obviously filled their backpacks full of meat. I never saw them again. I never saw them walking out. They had some blaze orange on, and I was looking out for them just in case I did see them. But I never noticed them again. But got to about the 1 o'clock mark. I hadn't had any luck finding any other animals, so I thought maybe I'll back out. Maybe I'll go and take their advice and sort of follow where they would have gone. I wanted to make sure, I was looking for them because I wanted to make sure that they walked out of there. But I thought, well, okay, I'll change of place is in, it's the right time for change of place. While I was sitting there, I'd been watching, because I'm quite close to the Ashburton, which is sort of on the coast. So Christchurch, Ashburton, they're on the east coast, and I could actually see the east coast from where I was up in this mountain range. And I'd been watching this low level cloud formation sort of make its way over, and I was thinking, it was closing in, but it wasn't quite getting close enough for me to be concerned about. But I thought, I wonder if that's going to affect anything. Anyway, about the 1 o'clock mark, I noticed a real change in the weather. It all of a sudden got quite cool, and I knew that indicated that there was weather coming in, and I thought, okay, this is something's going to happen here. And sure enough, this cloud sort of snuck in around behind me and started coming over and flooding into this gully system that I was in. So I filmed a bit of it on time lapse. It was pretty cool to watch it sort of come in, but I realised that this was probably going to fuck up my hunting plans for the day, because visibility was going to change. So I contemplated maybe walking a bit further on and seeing if I could get above it, or what was going to happen. But literally within probably 30 to 40 minutes of this starting, I was then in basically a complete whiteout. So shortly after the whole thing whited out, I thought, oh well, I'll just walk back to the hut. I'll sit there, wait it out, have something to eat, and it started raining as well. So I thought, well, that's good enough for me. I'm going to go back and just hide in the hut for a bit. And then on the walk back, it really started raining. Like, it really started coming down. Now, foolishly, I didn't stop, take off my pack, pull out my rain gear. I thought, I'll walk back. I'll get wet because I'll be back at the hut soon. But I got really wet, and to be honest, the clothing that I had on wasn't the right sort of clothing to be getting wet in and expecting to dry out, which I didn't realise. I found out obviously later on. So by the time I got back to the hut, my top layer was pretty well wet. It was pretty well soaked through. And I hadn't taken a lot of clothing with me because I hadn't taken any spare clothing with me, because this was only going to be a couple of days. And when I got back, there was a young couple in the hut. They were sheltering from the storm. They'd come up to do a day walk. They just had a backpack with them, a couple of muesli bars, They had bugger all in the way of food and no rain gear. They didn't expect it to rain. And they were sitting there shivering and trying to get out of the rain, trying to warm up, huddling together. And like it was raining pretty solidly outside. So I sat and had a bit of a chat to them. And they got to the point where they said, right, we're just going to have to walk out in the rain because obviously it's not going to stop. So I was getting pretty cold by then too. So I was thankful that they left so that I could jump into my sleeping bag and try and warm up a bit. I didn't have enough food to share with them. I'd only really taken the bare essentials in terms of food. I only had enough for myself. Didn't feel confident, and I literally didn't have enough to share with them anyway. So they took off. So I grabbed my went to go and grab my my dry bag that I'd sort of stashed there, and lo and behold, I'm assuming it was the German people had put a little chocolate bar and a muesli bar on top of my dry bag, and yeah, again, really nice thing to do, really considerate and thoughtful. I wish I'd been there when they'd come back now so that, I could have thanked them for that because that was super nice. That was a really nice unexpected surprise to find. So I ended up sheltering in my my sleeping bag then, got that out, set it up, made myself a hot chocolate and tried to dry myself out. So what I discovered was that outer shell that I had on was really good in the wind. In a cold wind, it's really good. It blocked out the wind. I think it was the QU Peloton 240 top. Blocked out the wind, worked really well for that. I was super happy with it under those conditions. But as soon as it got wet, I should have taken it off. I should have put my a different layer on or rain jacket. So a lesson learnt there again as well. Anyway, the rain did not let up. In fact, the rain ended up turning to snow. And then next thing, I had a snowstorm going on outside. So completely whited out, snowstorm going on outside. I'm cold, getting colder because the temperature just kept dropping. So hunting was over for the day. So it was actually the next day that I was flying out, the next afternoon. So I thought, right, well, maybe if this clears up, maybe this snow's a good thing. It'll get the tar up and moving and feeding. So hopefully tomorrow morning I'll get up nice and early. I'll get out there before sun up, glass for a bit. Hopefully see something up. Might get a hunt. Shoot something, and then I'm going to have to bust out of there and get to Christchurch in time to catch my flight. I did consider cancelling, changing the flight, but I didn't want to muck around with that, and I didn't really have I didn't know how much it was going to cost or anything. So through the night, the snow only got worse, and the wind picked up. Checked my weather app, and it was actually the Garmin weather prediction that I got said that it wasn't going to rain until 6 p.m. that night, and obviously it was raining much earlier than that. So even I know the Bureau of Meteorology in Australia rarely get it right, and it appears the Bureau of Meteorology in New Zealand are not much better. So yeah, ended up locked in this hut with no stove, so I had no heating. I had wet clothes, and it was getting cold in there. So because I had the fuel stove, so on this trip I took a liquid fuel stove, and I still had nearly a full canister left. So I had about 480 mils left of fuel. And so what I ended up doing was putting the stove on the floor, turning it on, and literally sort of huddling around it, trying to warm myself up. Now, obviously, I'm aware of the dangers of carbon monoxide buildup when doing this sort of thing. So I had to crack the window to make sure that fresh air was coming in, which didn't really defeat the purpose because the cold breeze was blowing in. But what I was able to do was sort of warm my hands up, and warm my legs up a bit, and try by huddling around this flame, the naked flame. So all I had to do was make sure that I had enough to boil some water for dinner, and then maybe boil water for a coffee the next morning. Anyway, spent a very cold night in the hut that night. And went, I opened the door at one stage during the night. I actually had a little thermometer, a little mercury thermometer, hung that outside for a while, went outside, had a look at it, and was down to -1, and that was without the wind chill factor, and there was snow all over everything. So the weather had completely turned on its head from a sunny, beautiful day to snow blowing sideways. Got up the next morning. Like I said, had a very sleepless night because I was cold. Got up the next morning. It was probably 4 o'clock when I woke up. The snow was still coming down. Wind was blowing. I thought there's no way I'm going to get a hunt in today. So I am just going to have to, just push out of here and give up. Give up on the idea of a hunt. So boiled myself a cup of coffee to try and warm up a bit, and then just sat there and burnt the rest of the fuel in the fuel bottle because I couldn't take it with me anyway. So I tried to warm up. Now, this is how cold it was because those people had been in the hut and I'd been in there and it was raining. We'd brought water in, drip water on the floor, that sort of thing. So there was a very thin layer of water on the floor. Now, I tried to clean it up using a dustpan and brush the night before, but obviously hadn't been able to get all of it. So in the low areas there was water pooling. When I'd taken my boots off the night before, I'd left them on the floor. There was obviously in a low spot, so there was water there. So my boots, the water had actually frozen, and my boots were now frozen in this shallow puddle of water. So I had to bust my boots out of the ice to be able to put them on. The boots themselves weren't frozen, but they were stiff. They were obviously very cold. There was ice on them, but they weren't frozen solid. So I didn't have major issues putting them on, but needed to warm myself up. So I did the same thing. Cranked up the stove, huddled around it, tried to warm my hands up as much as I could, warm my feet next to them as well, so I had warm feet going into the cold boots. And eventually the fuel ran out. As soon as the fuel ran out, that was it. I packed up. It was still dark, but I just packed up, put on a few layers, and put my rain gear on. So this was where the rain gear came into handy. I put my rain jacket, my rain pants on as my outer layers, put my gaiters on, and as many and my cold weather gloves and many layers as I could, and just punched out of there. When I left the hut, I was on the sheltered side, so as soon as I got round the corner, I took a video of it. I'll put it on my Instagram just to give you an indication. You'll see there's a bit of wind, and as soon as I sort of get around the corner and then I'm on the exposed ridge, the wind is just smashing me and the snow is coming sideways at me. So punched out of there as quickly as I could. Got down further into the tree belt, and obviously back being sheltered. It was still cold, but I was able to take my rain gear off and then hike out of there. Nothing sort of significant from that. The rest of that, I got back to the car. There was a fella I met down in the car park who was going up to check the traps. Told him about the night I had. He said, "You must have had a cold night," and I told him about the weather and the snowstorm and so forth. He thought that was quite funny. It must be something about stupid Aussies going over there that Kiwis find funny. But anyway, he was quite impressed that I'd stayed up there the night because he lived in the local area. So he was going to wander up there and check some of the traps that had been set and do some pest control. And basically got in the car and drove back to Christchurch, unpacked the rental, cleaned it up as much as I could. Had to wash it, obviously, before being returned. And because I'd driven down a few dirt roads, there's a bit of mud and so forth on it, so I cleaned that off, vacuumed it out a bit, packed up my gear, threw out the things that I couldn't bring back with me, food, open containers of food and that sort of thing. And didn't even bother showering or changing. Took the rental car back, dropped it off, booked the Uber, straight back to the airport. And I literally walked into the airport with my muddy boots, my hunting clothes still on, and walked up to the check-in counter. I think I may have changed my shirt or took the wet top off. Had a dry shirt on just for comfort, but literally the hunting pants that were still wet and my muddy boots. Got up to the check-in counter, got through there, no dramas, rifle booked in, ammunition, and then made it in time to get up to the Qantas lounge. Now, if you don't have a Qantas lounge membership or whatever airline you're going to go on, you can actually buy one-off entries, and I would highly recommend you doing it because for me it just made things a lot more comfortable. So in the Qantas lounge, they have showers, they have complimentary towels, they have food, they have drink, and it's all free. So I went and had a hot shower. I knew this, so I took a change of clothes with me. I had a hot shower, changed into some clean clothes, fresh socks, fresh undies, put my boots into my backpack, wet clothes into my backpack, went and sat down, had a decent meal, had a couple of beers, and just relaxed and chilled, charged my phone, all of that. So by the time I got on the plane, I was just super chilled and ready to face the flight home. My legs, my knees were screaming at me, my feet were screaming at me. So it was just nice to be able to sit down and relax and just contemplate on what I'd achieved in the trip. Very mixed emotions, obviously, because I was, the trip was over. I'd been planning this for years, theoretically years, obviously pre-COVID, but I'd been planning it in earnest for 6 months, and now it had been and gone, and I felt really inspired to come back. I was regretful that I'd pulled out of that hunt early because I'd gotten the shits. I'm still super happy because I had that last couple of days and that experience. I'd pushed myself physically. I'd seen some places that I may never see again. The beauty of New Zealand is just second to none, or nothing to what I've experienced so far. It's unequaled. So it was like I said, mixed emotions because I was going back. I was missing my children, so I was happy to be going back and seeing them. But I was still regretful that it was over and that I was on my way home. But that's the same with any trip. So all you can do is just swallow it down and be thankful for what I'd been able to experience so far. So while I was sitting there in the Qantas lounge, I made some more notes, and one of the sort of reflections that I was able to pen, I guess, while I was sitting there, to sort of share with you guys, to try and give you some sort of encouragement to go and do something like this yourself. When you see the things on social media and you know that this is something you want to do, really wanted to encourage you to go and do this and not wait for the time is right. Do it now. Book that airline ticket. book the trip. If you need to go with a guide, book the guide. Reach out to people. I can highly recommend Sam Carley. He was a super nice guy, and I know he's super successful on tahr. You've just got to check out his Instagram. There's plenty of others if he's not available or whatever. If you want some advice on doing it yourself, I'm more than happy to share where I went, the things that I experienced, and try and point you in the right direction, because you just never know what's going to happen tomorrow. You're not getting any younger. Yeah, just go and do it. So my final thoughts on this trip, I want to thank you, everybody that reached out to me about the first episode, and I hope that my ramblings here sort of haven't been too much for you and have been able to hold your attention. When you go to a place like New Zealand and have the opportunity to explore the backcountry that is on offer, you can't help but feel that you now owe the country a debt. You travel through these places that give you limitless beauty and the experiences that you can only dream of, and yet it seems to ask for nothing in return except for your presence and your silent admiration. I first went to New Zealand several years ago and only got a brief opportunity to view what was on offer. But after that trip, I knew I needed to come back and explore more on foot and delve into their remoteness. Those plans weren't able to come to fruition until now, and my only regret from this trip is that I have only now created this opportunity to come back, as I know I would have benefited more from doing this as a younger man. Life deals us a hand, and we can only play those cards we hold. But if you take anything away from my ramblings, it should be the importance of charging forward into these adventures that you dream of. It is better to die with memories than regrets. When people ask me, what are you hunting, when I first arrived in the country, my answer was simple: tahr and chamois and maybe a deer. What I came to realise during the trip and post-trip was that I wasn't just hunting those animals, I was hunting the adventure, the challenges, and the self-discovery that somewhere like this can offer you. Hey, thank you for listening in. If you'd like to contact me for a chat, pass on any feedback, or have some ideas for future podcasts, please reach out to me on Instagram at australian.hunting.backcountry or email australian.hunting.backcountry@outlook.com.au. For now though, please look after yourselves and your mates.